Hello everyone, this is Grandmaster Arturs Neiksans from Latvia, and I would like to share with you a very interesting endgame which I played in the last weekend in first German Bundesliga against the reigning European champion Ernesto Inarkiev. Obviously he was the favorite before the game. Of course, I'm very well aware of his recent excellent performances, both in the Russian team championships and of course the European individual championships, which he won in great style. But anyway, I wanted to have some fight in the game, so I played the game more or less aggressively, and in the time trouble I realized that it's going nowhere, so I had to fight for the draw. A couple of moves ago I made inaccuracy, which I initially believed to be a huge mistake, but this is not the case. Here, Ernesto played a very interesting and beautifully looking exchange sacrifice, f takes on e4. So knight takes on e2 naturally doesn't work because of various checkmating ideas, knight to d3, rook c1, bishop h3. I was basically down on the last seconds, so I decided just to take rook takes on e6 to simplify the position. When I went for this position, I sort of believed that it's a draw. I was like, 30 seconds on the clock, so what I saw is that if he plays rook e7, naturally my bishop cannot retreat anywhere if he goes to g2. So let me draw it for you. Then obviously knight goes to c2. If he goes to d3, the knight goes to f3. So I was planning to play f3, and what I saw is that rook takes on e4 naturally is impossible because I just take it, and I can even win this game. So that doesn't work. So of course I wasn't expecting that. What I calculated, that he plays g2, I have to play king g2 here. Because king f2 doesn't work, he simply grabs bishop f3, rook f7, rook takes on e2, and unfortunately rook takes on f3 and rook takes on g3. So this is completely lost. It wasn't that hard to calculate. So I was planning to play king g2 with the idea that if he takes on f3, I just take with the bishop. But I had this funny feeling that there might be some zugzwang, because basically I cannot make a single move. So let's say my opponent plays something like rook e5. Of course I did not have so much time in the time trouble to calculate if this will work for me or not, but this is what I was going to play. So after rook e5, black places white in the zugzwang. So naturally yet again I cannot play king f2 because of the g takes on f3 threat. I cannot move the rook because of the simple knight takes on f3 threat, and very importantly I cannot play h3 because here is a very nice idea that black just takes on h3, and the idea is that after king takes on h3, rook e4, here knight f3, there are some beautiful ideas that black gives the fork on g1 and wins the rook and the game. So that was what I was thinking. In a post-mortem analysis, of course, in the time trouble I didn't solve all of these lines, but after the game I discovered that after bishop b7, I'm now threatening to play f4, not king f2, but f4 and king f2. So I think black has to take the exchange. So this is a more or less forced line, which I think quite surely that this is a draw, because white keeps a lot of squares, most importantly these 4 squares, and there is no way for the black king to penetrate. So I can just move bishop f3, e2, f3, whatever squares, just not let the king go to the most important square g4, and if the h pawn against the g pawn is exchanged, well, this is of course an easy line, so I'll just move my king to the dark squared corner. So there's no questions about that. This I discovered, of course, in the analysis, but here basically I had no choice, and in the last 10 seconds I had to make a choice. So rook takes on e6 was the only move which I saw. Apparently the best move here was to be played h3, and after that there's some nice tactics involved. Here, this is quite a forced line, a very beautiful move f5, with the idea if he takes, I play knight g3, give a very important check, knight h5, and only then take rook takes on d3. So, of course, I mean, I cannot here play rook takes on d3 because of the rook takes on d2 check, and I lose the piece and the game. That was probably the best continuation. So normally, if the game would be played at the highest level, the game would be continued something like this: f5, knight f4, take here, rook c2, and I believe I have some decent chances. Most likely the d3 pawn will fall, so will my e6 and h3 pawn. So basically I'll be left with the rook and the knight versus the rook and the knight and the h6 pawn to defend, which should be a draw. I mean, I'll give the knight for the remaining pawn, and we'll reach rook versus rook and the knight, which is an easy theoretical draw. I mean, this is not the same as rook versus rook and the bishop, which is also a draw, but I mean, it's harder to reach it. Yeah, so I mean, I played this rook e6, which is, I would say, inaccuracy. So we reach this particular position. My opponent very quickly played g4, which is a normal move. So, I mean, I have to play king g2, otherwise knight f3, takes, rook d7, rook d1, and I can just resign. So what I want to play now is f3. And Ernesto here played rook f7. He was probably not satisfied that after rook e7 I'll play f3, so he sought a way how to stop the f3 pawn and then just march the king towards the e pawn. But in the time trouble, he was about, 3 minutes on the clock. He missed the move rook to c3. So this is a very interesting position, and initially, I believed that this is dead lost. I mean, I have no moves basically here. So if I play h3, he can just play h5, exchange, and I have not made any progress. And he'll just move the king basically on the black squares all around, eventually to d2. And I believe that I won't have the opportunity to exchange my bishop for the pawn on e2. Let's say something like bishop to b7, a6, because the black rook can easily control the maneuvers of the bishop. Usually in such positions, the rook is stronger piece. So here I found an amazing idea which I wanted to share with you. It was initially suggested by the Stockfish in the postmortem analysis. I double checked it and it seems it works. And here you go, it's bishop f5. So it's quite amazing. I mean, a very simple idea that I want to take on g4. It seems that this is a huge blunder. And here, after knight takes on f5, I'll play rook takes on e2. Let's say something very normal, h5, h3. So I want to take on g4 and play rook e4. So he has to play rook c4, h takes, and h takes. And as a matter of fact, as astounding may seem, this is a draw. I mean, I tried to find a win here for quite a lot of time in the postmortem analysis, but I failed to find anything. So I decided to ask a question to Stockfish, the 6th version, and at a depth of 61, it also couldn't find it. So I believe this is an amazing new fortress, which I'll show you in a different variation a bit later. So I was quite excited about this when I found out. I'll also correct myself that here h3, which I showed briefly, it was an inaccuracy. I forgot that after h3, black easily wins after knight f3. So knight f3, rook takes on e2, g takes on h3. So there's yet again the same idea that black wins the rook and the game. So if we go back, after g4, king g2, Rook c3, so this is probably how the game would have continued, and bishop f5 we go to the amazing fortress, which I'll analyze a bit later. In the game happened rook f7, which is a very normal move. I mean, black doesn't want to allow white to play f3, the king is stuck on the king side, so there's a very simple plan for black. I mean, the king goes to f8, something like to b4, to d2, and seemingly he wins the game. So I have to play bishop d3, obviously. So black is forced to play rook e7. Now f3 I cannot play. I cannot move my bishop to the long diagonal to play f3. And unfortunately also h3 here doesn't work for the same idea, because black just takes on h3 here and knight f3. This is the same idea all over in all variations. So rook e2, knight g1. So I'm basically forced to stand and wait. And sometimes, you know, it's not the worst strategy. I mean, for black, I mean, of course, he is enjoying such a dominant position. The e2 pawn is so well advanced, and the knight on d4 is eyeing for the beautiful square on f3. But I mean, black still has to prove that he has a direct win here. So I just decided to wait. Actually, as it turns out, I could have here taken bishop takes on e2, which was the main motive in many variations. The idea is that he cannot take with the rook. I mean, he can, but I'm sorry, with the knight. I apologize. With the knight, because I simply play king f1. So he is forced to play knight takes on g3, h takes or f takes, and this is a draw. So he is forced to take with the rook. And here I can just take. Actually, this is quite funny that it's very much possible that I can go to the very same fortress which I mentioned earlier, but this is a worse version, so I'm not sure about it. So, but I wanted to show you is the idea that here I can try to exchange the second to last pawn. Obviously, black cannot play h5, because after h takes f3, I exchange the last pawn. So, what I was not sure about is this particular endgame. If this is a draw, so king g6, king h4. And what I discovered is that most likely because of the black pawn who is positioned on h6, not on h7, this is a draw. Because eventually white will run out of the moves, he'll have to push the pawns forward, and with the pawn on h6 it will be much easier to exchange the last pawn with some ideas like f4, g4, f5, king h5, g5. So I won't show you any concrete variations. I just double checked that this is indeed a draw. So I also checked it with the Nalimov table base. So this is a draw. But you know, sometimes it's very difficult to make this decision to go into an endgame which is balancing on the loss and the draw. So you're not entirely sure. If I would have known, of course, during the game that this is a theoretical draw, I would have went for it. But I did not have that knowledge during the game. But I mean, anyway, I mean, there is no harm. I mean, I can take on e2 whenever I want. So I just decided to wait. If I'm not sure, I have one rule, I don't play it. So that's the golden rule. So I just wait. So black is preparing the march on the king. So this is how the game progressed. And my idea was I wanted for black to go as far as possible to the queen side, and at the moment when he plays something like king c5 or king b2, then I take bishop takes on e2. So for example, here I play bishop c4, and I had an idea. If he plays now king c5, now I can take bishop e2. Yet again, knight takes on e2 is simply king f1 with the easy draw. So he has to take with the rook. I exchange, and now I had an idea that because of the black king is so far away, now I can play f3, which is impossible before. Because before he could just take, play knight to d4, and the king was somewhere on f6 on g7, so this would be a losing position. Here, my king easily marches to h5, and after g4, g5, I exchange the last pawn. So the point is, after f3, black cannot stop losing the g4 pawn, and this should be a draw. So let's say something like king f5, I can just take on g4, h4, g5 and exchange the last pawn. Actually, I think even h3 is possible here, and perhaps even better. So I mean, this position is a draw. So that was my idea. I mean, I felt that taking on e2 should be a draw somewhere, and I wanted to be totally sure about it to sacrifice it at the right moment. Well, but as it happened, I did not find the right moment in the game. So after rook e8, of course, there's yet again the moment when I can take on e2. And what I calculated here, apparently I misjudged the variation. I had only calculated, yet again I did not pay too much attention on h3 because I was not sure about this position, if this is a draw. But this is actually a draw. I mean, would you believe it or not? I mean, black cannot make a progress. So what I was paying most my attention, and Inarkiev after the game also said that why didn't you play this variation, because I mean seemingly f3 should be a draw. And I believe that this is not the case because I calculated the following variation: knight to d4 takes here. So I cannot play king h3, king h4 because I'll never get the chance to exchange the g pawn versus the h pawn, so I'll have to play something like h4 and king e4. So I spent quite a lot of time trying to evaluate this position. And I realized that I have basically only two choices. Either I play g5 immediately, or I play king f2 and just stand. So I calculated both. So let's say I play g5, naturally black plays h5. I'm obliged to play g4 because otherwise black just plays king f5, blocks the pawns and just collects one after another. So let's say a possible idea would be king f5, king g4, knight f5, knight g3, and everything falls apart. So what I wanted to play is g4 here and king g3, king f5, and I had calculated this position in the game, and initially I believe that I found a draw. Because here I want to play g6. King g6, of course, is a draw, and I thought, okay, if he plays knight e6, I play h5. I want to play h6, h7, or g7, so the sole knight won't be able to handle the problems. And I calculated something like this, that after king g5, I can play h6 anyway, and this is a draw. Or, for example, knight to g7, h6, here, and this is the draw. Black cannot play g3 because of g7 here and h7, and actually he can lose the game. So I was quite excited about that, and initially I was already pretty much made the choice that I'll play for this, and then I suddenly decided that I need to double check all of the variations, all of the possible continuations for black, and I noticed the very dangerous move knight c6, and it seems that the black knight is moving to g8. I cannot stop it, no way. I mean g7, knight e7, knight g8, black makes it on time, and after h5, knight e7, this is the same. So let's say something like king h4, knight g8, and this is losing. So this is a bit shock for me. And unfortunately here also was it here? Yes, here also any other continuations. There was an idea earlier to play h5. This also doesn't work. I believe it was here with the same idea of knight c6 and put the knight on e7. So that's losing. So I thought, okay, I mean g5 doesn't work. So what about king f2? So initially I believe that king f2 should be a draw because I did not see a direct continuation for black. That is until the moment when I noticed knight c6, and well, this is losing. The same motives: g5, h5, g4, h takes, king g3, king f5, and I'm losing. So it was quite a disappointment that I cannot force the draw this way, and somehow, yes, I did not pay too much attention on the h3, but like I said, I mean, I just didn't know. I mean, if the h and g pawn versus the h pawn and the knight is a draw or not. So I did not have the courage to try. So yet again, I mean, if I don't know it, I don't go for it. So the game continued for quite some time. So Ernesto was trying to employ the only possible idea for black, which is try to set up a Zugzwang. So here the idea is if I play bishop d3, which actually happened in the game, black plays rook e6, so white is in some sort of a Zugzwang. Initially I saw h3 here, and I was quite excited. I mean, this should be immediately a draw. So let's say if he takes something like here, I can just take, and there is no knight f3. I mean, this is a blunder. So I thought, okay, this is great. I mean, and after h5, I can just take, and now I can take bishop takes on e2, but actually I can postpone it to some moments later. Knight takes on e2 and f3. And as it happens, this is a draw. Because check, king f1, takes, let's say, whatever, check here, and black has run out of checks and the game is drawn. So I was quite happy about that. And suddenly after h3, I noticed that black can play rook e6. I'm sorry, instead of yes here, that he can play rook e6. And I hallucinated that this is losing, because here bishop d3 doesn't work, because yet again black employs the same idea of g takes on h3. If I take, knight f3 and knight g1. So for some reason I suddenly didn't believe in the variation, and I failed to find the idea that now I can actually take on e2, and after g takes, king takes on h3, knight takes on e2, king h4, I believe this is an easy draw, because the knight is pinned with the rook. So basically the only chance for black is to defend the knight, king d4, king to d3, but I can easily g4, g5, exchange the last pawn. So this is a draw. Well, yeah, I did not notice it. But I mean, yet again, I mean, no harm done. Even though this probably was the easiest draw I could have made with the motive bishop takes on e2, including the h3 move. The game continued something like this, so I still felt that I have some chances, because after king c5, my idea was to play rook c1, which happened in the game, so black cannot progress. I give a check here, and now I sacrifice the piece. And I believe that this also should be an easy draw, because I can easily exchange the last pawn of black. So if, let's say, after rook c1, if black goes king b6, now I can return rook e1 with the same motives, king g2, bishop takes on e2, h3, and exchange all the pawns. Everywhere is the same. So Ernesto here used the triangulation of the black. He played king d6, rook e1, and king d5. So yet again, this is a very smart motive of putting a Zugzwang for white. And after king g2, he played his last chance, h5. And here I had my second to last chance to save the game, which by no means was an easy way to find. I mean, I would have to play h3 here. Black takes. Now I play king h1. So black has to make some kind of a move. Basically, it doesn't matter. Rook e5. Now I play bishop takes on e2. He cannot exchange the rook on e2, because I just exchange king h2, king h3, g4, and I exchange the last pawn. This is a draw. So he has to take the knight, king h2. Amazingly, I mean, white is down a whole piece, but this is a draw. King d4 and rook a1. I activate my rook, take, king takes on h3. The h5 pawn is weak, so I mean, this is a draw. I did not see this variation, to be honest. I had some ideas, but I could not combine them together. And after h5, I played king h1. So here, black played his last chance trying to win the game. He played rook b6. As Ernesto said in the post-mortem analysis, he did not want to play king c5, which I initially believed to be winning, because now, after king g2, king b4, I cannot manage to play all of the ideas which I intended. But he said, and quite rightfully, that after king c5, now I can play h3, g takes, and bishop e2 with the same idea. And even in this variation, the king is more further away from the king side, so this is even an easier draw. So that's why he played rook b6. And here's the amazing thing. I played rook takes on e2, which initially I believe this is the draw. Because I know this particular endgame, but I mixed up the exact setup. So eventually the game continues something like this here, and rook takes on f2. This would be a draw if the h2 pawn here would be standing here. Because there's an amazing fortress. I just play king g1, put the bishop on the long diagonal a8 to h1, and I keep under control these important squares. And the black king cannot penetrate and make any progress. So this is a non-theoretical position. So I here play bishop g6, and after h4 I play king g1, inviting to take h takes on g3, reaching a theoretically drawn position. So it's actually quite amazing. I mean, black would be happy here to exchange, put the king on e3, and somehow exchange the rook for the bishop, because this would be a winning pawn endgame, but he cannot do that. I mean, there's no way. He could even put the rook on f3, but I won't take it. I'll just play king g2. So there's no way for black to make a progress. And in the game happened quite an amazing blunder, which seemed a very natural move for me. Black here played rook to b2. I mean, it's very logical. I mean, you want to put the rook as far as away possible from the white king. But this particular square gives away the possible check on b1, which turned out to be decisive. Here, black was winning after rook d2. And if I play bishop f5, there is a very nice motive to give an intermezzo check, and rook d4. And I cannot take on g4 because rook f4 and I lose a piece. So if I do nothing, black just plays h4, h3, grabs the h2 pawn, and combine together with the h pawn and the rook on h1 or h2. This is losing. Unfortunately, this is losing. Yeah, so what happens here if I take g takes on h4, it basically transforms to what happened in the game. So I cannot do that. And the difference here after rook to b2 is that after bishop f5, he no longer has this check and to play rook b4. So he is forced to play rook b4 here. And the amazing thing is that in the postmortem analysis here, I discovered a new drawing position which I did not know before. Actually, I saw the line during the game, but yet again, I mean, I was not sure, is this a draw or not? I mean, and I had like 1 or 2 minutes to decide, to make a decision. I mean, I have to either take on h4 or play h3, otherwise black just plays h2, h4, h3 and wins the game. So the drawing line here was to play h3. So black cannot take g takes on h3 because I play king h2 and all of the pawns get exchanged, and this is a draw. So he has to take here, bishop takes, I'm sorry, king g2 or bishop takes on g4, it doesn't matter. And I saw this position and I wasn't sure if this is a draw or not, even though I did not see a direct win for black. But as it happens, this is a draw. And let me show you one line. If the h pawn would be missing from the board, this would be an easy theoretical win for black. So I'll try to employ the same idea which is known to be used in this position. g2, obviously. Black wants to play king g3 here, rook f2, which would be the same idea without the h pawn. Now I sacrifice the pawn, king g3, so the white king is stuck and various mating ideas occur. But here I have this amazing move, bishop g4. So after rook f4, so I can play here bishop d7, but I'll just show you the idea why it's so important that white has this h3 pawn. I can even play a passive defense here and just give away the pawn. And my king safely gets out of the corner. So I just give the pawn. This is also important check. Give the pawn, move it away. And that's it. I mean, I've made out of the corner. It doesn't matter that I'm aligned to the last rank as long as I'm not stuck on g1, cut off by rook f2. This is a draw. This is a theoretical draw, so all I have to do is to move to the opposite color corner of my bishop and just make an easy draw there. Yes, but of course, I mean, this was discovered in a postmortem analysis, and it made me actually quite excited because I did not know it for sure. So what happened in the game was that I took on g4 here. And this is losing, but actually some small tragic comedy here happened. Is that black here played rook b6, pretty much confident, I mean, that he is winning the game. After rook b6 here, rook h6, I could yet again draw the game by playing the h3, g3, bishop g4, any other move. So it's the same motive. I mean, black cannot make a progress. So what would be the correct continuation here? Black had to play rook b3 to be accurate. Now he wants to play rook h3, rook takes on h4. So I can try to keep the pawn, but I cannot keep it forever because I have to keep an eye also on the threat king f3, rook c1 check, and the rook on c3 takes away the important c6 square for the bishop. So after bishop a4, a rook to c5, this is losing, unfortunately for me. So for example here, if I would play h3, unfortunately king g3 decides for black with the checkmate on c1. So this was quite interesting. I mean, what happened in the game was a mutual blunder. Black played rook h6. I yet again did not play h3. I played here. And eventually we reached this position, which is theoretically lost. There is just no way for the bishop handle two important things. He doesn't want to allow the king goes to f3, which he manages at the moment, but yet again at the same time he has to keep an eye on the maneuver king g5, king h4, king h3. So he cannot do the two functions at the same time. So sooner or later black puts a zugzwang for white bishop. So which happened in the game, perhaps not in the best way, but so here the bishop is positioned quite badly. Now king goes back on g5. I keep the control on the f3 square, so but I cannot protect the king h4, king h3 idea. So if I would have the pawn on g3, this would be a draw. On h2, this is losing. So you can see how narrow is the margin between a draw and a loss in these endgames. And here any move loses because after bishop f1, black wins with a spectacular idea of g3. Now, if only I could play h3 and somehow put my bishop on g4, this would be a draw yet again. But this is not the case, because here I lose the pawn endgame. And after g3, if I exchange, it seems this is a draw, but I mean, I'm stuck in the corner, so it's very easy win for black. I mean, children are being taught about this position because the white king is in the wrong corner. So what happened in the game is that I got king h3 and I resigned the game. So where was the mistake? You let me answer that. If you return back, I was thinking if it's actually possible to salvage this particular position. After bishop d3, rook takes on f2, h4 loses because of, let's say, a simple rook f3 or g takes on h3. So I thought, okay, what about if I play bishop f1 here and king g1? My idea is to play h4. But the problem is, if I play h4 here, g takes on h3, bishop takes on h3, I believe this is a draw unless I'm seriously mistaken. But I mean, this is not important, as black can just simply take on g2 and play king e3 and winning the pawn endgame. I lack one tempi. If black here would play instead of rook takes on g2, king e3, I'll play whatever move, bishop d5 or bishop b7, and this is a theoretical draw. So there's no way. I mean, bishop b7, king e3. So what is black now threatening? He is threatening to play h4 with the idea of h3. So I'm forced to take. He plays king f4, rook c3, rook h3. So we transform to the position which happened in the game. So there is no way from this moment, which made me ask a question. So where did I make the mistake? Was it actually king h1, king g2? And I realized that I can actually go for the aforementioned idea which I told you in the very beginning of this analysis, that I can take with the bishop, rook e6, and now play king g2. And as amazing as it seems, there is no way for black to win the game. I mean, rook e2 of course is impossible. I just exchange, play f3. Not h3 because knight to d4 and I'm losing easily. If the black king was on g6, this would be losing because black would just play g takes on f3. But here I can easily manage king f4, king g5, and I exchange the last pawn. If black does nothing, I just take on g4, play h3, and that's it. This is a draw. I have exchanged all of the pawns. So he cannot take with the rook. He has to take with the knight. And now I play rook to a1. So I think the threat is rook a5. So king e4 is the most natural move I could think of. I exchange a pair of pawns. If black takes here, h5 pawn falls very quickly, so this is easy draw. Black has to play knight e4. Now I exchange the pair of pawns. So, and I try to analyze this position. If here are actually any chances for black to win, and I realize there aren't. So let me show you position. So I'll put the most perfect position possible for black. So let's say probably the best possible position for black would be to put the rook on c4, the knight on d4, king on e4, with some ideas of knight to f3 and either checkmate me on the first rank by playing rook e1, rook g1, or another idea is how to win the game would be somehow coordinate the pieces. Put let's say rook on e2, knight on e4, sacrifice on f2, and then we easily win the pawn endgame, which is actually known and theoretical pawn endgame, which is winning for black. So, but the problem is black will never have the time. So let me illustrate you some of the ideas. What could be happened in the game? So all I need to do is put the rook somewhere active. Probably the corner is the best square for the rook. So I just wait. I do nothing. I mean, I can attack, of course, the g4 pawn to draw away the attention of the black's pieces. So eventually, black makes some moves, but he cannot make a progress because the king is all the time under attack. So if he goes too far away, I just attack the g4 pawn and I make the draw. So let's say, okay, let's assume that somehow black can position the rook on the first line. So I'll play something like, okay, I'll play something like check here and maybe rook h6. So the idea which I wanted to show you, what happens if now black goes here. So it seems that he is winning, but as a matter of fact he is not, because here I have a very spectacular idea of rook takes on g4, and after king takes on g4 this is a stalemate. I mean, white has two pawns but they are blocked, and there is no way for black to win. I mean, knight to e1 is met by king h3 and I save the rook. Rook g1 is impossible because I take on f3, king takes on f3, and I'd actually win the game. So this is a draw. It's amazing. And there's just no way. I mean, no way. I tried all of the possible variations to put the knight on e4, rook on e2, at the same time protect the g4 pawn, at the same time protect the f2, f3 breakthrough. It's just impossible. I mean, if black would somehow exchange the rooks, this would be easily winning position. But, I mean, there's no way. So I decided to turn on engine. This time I used Stockfish 6. So I asked him, is it possible to win this position? So I put the black rook on c4, knight to d4, king on e4. I even let the black to move. So he was thinking for quite some time, and at the depth of 61 he was still clueless. I mean, he could not find it. So I've come to the conclusion this is an unknown fortress for me. So I'll know it for the future if I'll have some similar structures. It's possible actually that after the g4 pawn is on g5, it might be possible that this is winning, but I don't want to draw any conclusions. I just know for sure that this is a draw. So it's quite amazing that I could have reached this particular fortress from two possible scenarios. One would be to play it earlier in the game. If Ernesto would have here played the computer suggestion rook on c3, then I would have to make this super spectacular bishop f5 and reach the same position. Or what would have happened in the game later, some 20 moves later, is here after I made the decisive mistake, rook takes on e2. I mean, on bishop takes on e2, it seems it still is a draw. So I'm only drawn to the conclusion that Endgame still have some magic. I mean, right now there's going on the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Sergei Karyakin, and we all of us were a witness that how amazingly Sergei Karyakin can defend, and very often a huge advantage in chess, it's not enough. I mean, you are required more. You're required of yet another mistake. So this particular game and the theoretical positions were a fine example that there are so many drawing options in chess that sometimes when you let your guard down, you think you are lost, you could actually save the game. So thank you for your attention. I hope you will learn something new. At least for me, this was an amazing new experience, and I'll continue studying Dvoretsky's Endgame manual. I'm not sure actually if this kind of position is in the book, because I recently started to study it in earnest, but I would suggest to dear viewers and listeners, do the same and work on your endgame skills, because you never know when the obtained knowledge will work in your favor. Thank you for listening, and see you some other time.